Hello all.
Hi there.
Hey, Kara.
We'll just wait a few more moments for others to join us. This may in fact be quite a quiet meeting. I've been incredibly busy with the move and don't have a speaker coming in. So we'll go over our regular agenda items. One of the things while we wait for other people to come in that I'd like to question you on is for Citicon, which is the 7th and 8th of June in Austin, Texas. I think given world events and the ongoing pandemic, it might very well be interesting for us to do a virtual track. And this is not a track that will be shown at Citicon, but will sort of be run in parallel to it. And given that this is becoming something that I'm increasingly convinced we should do, I might as well just ask your feedback while you're here. It probably was not the question you were expecting to get first thing in this meeting.
I couldn't understand, like, okay, you said like a virtual track to run in parallel to actual conference with a separate program, or like, sorry, I'm not.
It would certainly be a separate program of talks, and I don't think it would be as extensive as the in-person conference. It would just sort of be a series of talks. And I don't know if it'd be run at the exact same time. That makes it very hard for attendees of the actual conference. And maybe it would be run the following day. I just think it would be, I would like the conference to be as inclusive as possible. And it seems that for various reasons, people are hesitating to travel. So.
Yeah, makes sense to me. By the way, I think Citicon is hybrid, yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So it will be broadcasted live, or?
Certainly the keynotes will be live streamed from my understanding. The other talks will be recorded through the Hopin platform, but I don't think they will be live.
Okay. Yeah, separate virtual only makes sense to me to, make sure people who can't travel can at least get some kind of feeling for be part of the community or submit talks, or yeah.
Okay. So let me just.
Is
okay.
It,
yes.
Sorry, I'm just thinking like having a, separate from the speakers and sessions that will be, at the in-person event. Is it possible to record those sessions and play those for the virtual event?
The in-person speakers? Yes,
Yeah.
My understanding at this point, we're planning on recording them. That's really the LF events team, but they should be recorded, and then they will, I don't think they'll be live streamed except for possibly the keynotes, but they will be available on YouTube afterwards. On the CDF YouTube afterwards. Does that make sense?
It does. Would they be part of a virtual event though? Like included?
Yeah, so right. So the live talks will all be recorded, and usually there's a delay a number of days before they go up on YouTube. And so the virtual track will say we did it the day after the conference and ran that. eventually they would all end up on YouTube together under the Citicon heading, you know, the channel for CDF.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Just so that the virtual people have the opportunity to see the same talks that were done in person as well. That would be nice.
Yes. I think that's really important.
How is CFP coming, by the way, on that CFP reviews?
Yeah, that's going fantastic. We have 200 submissions and the reviews are so many good talks. So that's actually been quite thrilling, and it will be finalized in the next few weeks and announced. So the schedule will be finalized and announced. So look for that mid this month. Yeah, that should be really good. Okay. I will share the notes for today, although I'm really glad that they're here. Okay. Okay, so today is a bit of a quiet meeting. There were no action review items, so that's good. Citicon Updates, the CFP is closed, but we probably will be opening another for the virtual track. I'll have more information on that shortly, but it is something that if for whatever reason you knew that you would not be able to attend Citicon in person and therefore did not submit a talk, this is an opportunity for you to submit a talk to share with the CDF community, and that would be shared on a virtual track. So I think that's good. Our best news of the day, I'm so happy. Melissa McKay has been nominated by FATI to join as chair of the Interoperability SIG. And yes, very good news. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you very much. You know, I don't know if a lot of you know me at all. I could give you a little intro.
Yes.
Quickly. I am based in Denver, and I'm currently a developer advocate with JFrog. And prior to that, I was a developer for a very long time, over 20 years, and very much involved in each part of the development process. And I'm really excited about this because I just remember over the times in my career how often we'd run into problems trying to communicate with different tools and resources out there. And I just am glad to have the opportunity to help smooth that out for future developers.
Welcome. We really we appreciate your participation and joining as chair. So this is a really good moment. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for stepping up, Melissa.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Good. And now we can discuss the PRs that we have for steps, stages, and quality gates.
Yeah, I just added that topic because like I've been, you know, we have this new SIG software supply chain, which was approved like mid-February, and we will probably have the very first meeting of the SIG next Thursday, same time as this meeting. So we will be rotating interop and supply chain SIG. And as mentioned in the new SIG charter or whatever README file, there are overlaps or relations to different SIGs or projects like interoperability events, best practices, also projects from OpenSSF and so on, to take a look at software supply chain from CI/CD perspective. And I've been reading about this CNCF security tag, software supply chain best practices, OpenSSF secure software factory, and so on. And as one may expect, there are overlaps as well, or they are talking about similar stuff as we have been talking as part of our interoperability SIG. Now, some of the things that got my attention in the white paper and also in the software factory, as well as all these three like steps, stages, and quality gates, like I'm wondering if it makes sense to somehow identify some of the key steps or stages within a typical software supply chain, because they are, again, the software supply chain is supposed to look at software supply chain from CI/CD perspective, and we have this ongoing work thanks to Anne-Marie, these steps and stages, and then thanks to also Justin, these gates. They are kind of very relevant, related, close to each other, but looking at these PRs and the quality gates discussion from software supply chain, would it make sense? Because our discussions are mostly around like typical steps and stages and quality gates perhaps. And we may touch some of these things under these PRs from software supply chain perspective. But yeah, how we can extend our discussions to cover these aspects as well, software supply chain aspects, like, for example, if you are bringing open source components as your dependencies, you may need to have additional steps or stages within your pipelines to vet those false components or even build your own dependencies. So it's, again, this is a very long intro to this topic, but this is the thing I've been thinking about, and this will be one of the topics we will start talking about next week during our first meeting, and looking for, how we can push the topic together.
Do you feel like you need solidity in the proposals of like what the naming is, or is it more just like a mapping exercise?
I think we need both, or perhaps even more. Again, that's what we did with Interop as well. Like, we start with vocabulary or glossary or that type of stuff. Like, we probably are doing similar things everywhere. Like, when we bring a new FOSS, we run those through some SCAS, like, type of tools, like whether FOSSA or Black Duck or whatever. And those are like distinct stages within our FOSS consumption pipeline or whatever. I know the name. Exactly. What do we call them? That could be a good exercise. So everyone can talk about what they are doing, and we can perhaps come up with like this definitions of those stages, which could then map to Anne-Marie your stuff, or maybe your stages could be improved with these things. And no, it's mixed, like vocabulary versus what are we actually doing as part of our pipelines.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, let me pass
You're
two links
muted.
here.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Is
Yes,
that working
now.
better? Okay, good.
Yes.
Like, while we're talking, I'm actually adding on to that thread. Like, yeah, right now we're building a compliance pipeline. So I'm going to give you all the names of all of our tasks, right? And I see other people have theirs too. And in terms of naming, what we were doing is we're building Tecton tasks. So we're trying to use the wording from the interoperability pipeline steps as like prefixes on our Tecton tasks, so that we know exactly what they're doing. And then what we're going to do with that in the end is, we want a system that says, okay, as these tasks execute, we're going to save the output to an evidence repository. And the last step is, let's make sure we check the evidence repository and make sure all these things happened that we expect to happen for our product builds. And if the steps happen, then we're going to approve, right? So that's kind of what we're building right now. I'm going to keep typing. I'm going to put this up in a second in the issue comments.
It doesn't currently have a lot of software supply chain work. It's something what we're kind of trying to develop at the moment. But we do have a lot of compliance stuff around Sarbanes-Oxley and things like that. And so I suspect that there's a lot of commonalities between these kinds of compliance pipelines.
Yeah.
People are trying to implement the same maturity. They're trying to meet the same maturity goals, right? There, I just threw it up in there in the issue.
From a developer's perspective, and in our world, it's like you get a badge if you are Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, and that has like to get the passing grade, you have to do like 6 things or whatever the list of items are. And so that's we might call that like a pipeline certification, something along those lines. I know Amazon had a similar thing where it wasn't SOX related, but it was, you got different medals for your pipeline. So you might have a bronze pipeline or a gold pipeline, and that rating had different qualifiers for like what it took to get there.
That's kind of cool.
We're
Yeah,
currently
like,
trying to build something like that for eBay too, like some understanding of what it means to be like good. So it's like trying to develop levels, like a maturity model for these kind of things.
are you familiar with the salsa maturity model?
Yeah, that one's better than the one that we've come up with by a long shot. But the thing that we're doing is less around software supply chain and more like, I think like bronze, like the bronze level is like automated to staging. Silver is automated to production, and gold is experimentation culture.
Okay.
And there's a handful of like technical things you have to do to hit those bars. But this is not vetted yet. This is kind of like our initial attempts at what we think are reasonable things to do.
Yeah, we have maturity levels as well. It's not quite the same idea, but we have, for example, I work in a managed services group, right? So if you even want some customers to touch your managed service, there's a few things you have to do, right? Like you have to sign your images and, run known vulnerability checks and a couple other things, right? 5 things, I think. So that's like level 1. And if you want to take money for this service, there's actually some other pipeline checks you have to do. So for us, it's more like a software lifecycle maturity thing. But yeah, I think they're trying to build pipelines that will sort of grade people on how many of these steps they complete.
Yeah, I'd love to see what those criteria are for y'all. Yeah, at some point.
We're actively defining them right now.
I'm trying to think, like, can I reasonably move the conversation that we're having internally into the open and still have it operate in the same way that it needs to get buy-in? I'm of 2 minds, but I'm leaning towards probably not, because it's like such a tiny little idea that we're trying to shepherd around that too many eyes may scare it away, kind of deal.
Yeah, I have
we
a
probably
list
share
of,
it in like a small forum, I suppose.
yeah, exactly. I have a list of what we said we think we could get away with, but it's certainly not
Yeah.
approved. Let me see, like, beta level stuff. See if I can find it.
Something that got my attention from what you passed there, and Mary, like, because again, based on what I read or what I watch, people generally, like, everyone talks about security compliance, and one, like in my case, security is different than someone else's case. And what I see that like lint or coverage or unit test type of stuff, you including them in your compliance pipeline is actually a great thing, because not everyone thinks that way. For some people, like security of software supply chain, mostly about security, and they could consider this unit test or lint static analysis type of stuff as quality type of checks. So there is very distinct separation between what you mean by security and what it contains. So it's, yeah, my thinking is similar to what you put there. Because like,
yeah.
Interestingly, and what we're also finding is that often people actually want to break, they don't want one huge pipeline, they want at least 2. They want like your build test pipeline, and then they want your like certification pipeline, which is like security provenance. They actually want that separate, because then what you can do is you can give teams a lot of control over their build test pipeline and their CI process, but say, thou shalt go through the security process, like make that more rigorous and standardized, right?
Yeah, and it's like these things, they are not expected to run in sequential order, I suppose. They could all be treated or considered like test cases, Like you have 5 different things running, linting, unit tests, like security license checks or whatever. And if one fails, then you can't pass because something failed there. So it's like, it's not all wait each other until like, and you see the light at the end of the tunnel after a day. Like it doesn't like.
Yes, in fact, both I know IBM and Red Hat, when they implement this, what they've actually done is they made the source of truth like an internal repo. Like at IBM, it's literally like an internal GitHub repo that's collecting all the evidence from all these disparate build pipelines. And at the end, there's one step that says, tell me if you did somehow all the things, right? That's kind of what they're doing, rather than it's literally one pipeline.
That we're solving that, this like wanting control over your pipeline, but also mandating steps is this mechanism of badging. Like if you didn't do your Sarbanes-Oxley check, I mean, you can configure your pipeline to not require it. You can't ship that to prod because you didn't get the magic badge that says that 2 people reviewed your code. And so it's a trust but verify sort of deal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The other thing I think this related to Tecton chains as well. Like, I'm wondering, like, where are we, like, where the industrial communities are when it comes to kind of applying observability principles to all this pipeline stuff? Like, yes, Tecton chain brings some of those capabilities, but how, like, how general that approach is? Like, we observe our, cloud native applications when they run in production, but where are we observing the entire pipeline? Or our pipelines, are they observable? Like this, taking this type of approach to actual pipeline and collecting metadata or getting whatever is important, and again, looking at that thing and then enforcing policies based on what we observe. Like that is kind of interesting approach, perhaps, I don't know.
One of the cool things I've seen on the observability front is like using trace stores in kind of like the open telemetry tracing style, where you get to see like a graph of like this step took this long and it did these 3 sub-steps, and then this step took that long, and you get to like see a visual representation of like what the build process looked like and what your release process looks like and where the delays are and things like that. It's pretty cool. But in terms of like having defined metrics, it seems like you're talking about defined metrics that random tools can hook into to like say, no, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, it's like also, yeah. Again, this is, I am still thinking about these things, like, because like, again, like, let's say we are building a container which rebuilding, let's say, same versions of everything, and we are generating an SBOM for that artifact. And like, that SBOM could be considered that as like, I don't know if it's not a metric, but it's some metadata. And then that observer or whatever could, get that SBOM and compares that SBOM with the previous build of the same thing. And if there is any difference, the police could kick in and say, you are supposed to be building same thing, but what we have now is different than what we had during previous, and something is wrong here. Like, you just catch that right after that happens, and you just don't let that thing continue. I don't know if it could be called observability, but in a sense, like, you are collecting stuff. I don't know, just some rough ideas.
Is that the thing that the events group does? Is there like tracking events?
Yeah, I was going to say the CD events might, one of its goals is certainly to enable greater observability in your pipelines. And I would, I feel like, Fetsi, you could speak more to this, but I would think that Tecton using cloud events now, it has some similar functionality.
Yeah, if the events carry such metadata like SBOM, I know Matthias, I see Matthias there. or it is just saying that, oh, something happened here, maybe you should look at it, and then another step kicks in and checks what happened. Like, I don't know, having atomic steps rather than dumping everything on events. Yeah, Matthias, sorry.
So retracing. So seed events, the idea there is that you basically for each step in the pipeline, you send events to notify what is happening. So I guess by listening to the events, if you want to have some kind of observer, one could listen to events and see that, okay, in a pipeline, you're sending all these events. Okay, then you're doing what you're complied to do. And if we're missing events or we're noticing that you're not sending events we're expecting, then you can have some alarm or something sending in. So that way you can make a pipeline observable by looking at events sent in the pipeline. Also linking back to this with controlling pipelines and so on. Last November, we had a presentation from Santiago Torres Ares, I'm pronouncing his name, about in toto, which is kind of like a framework to control the pipelines and know what steps you've done in it. So maybe that is something in this discussion also.
Yeah, sorry for sounding confused, because like reading too many things in a short period of time brings all these different things, and then you start seeing like relations. All these things are related to each other. It's kind of software supply chain, CI/CD, like, yeah.
By the way, I did find like some very basic stuff. I threw that in there too. Code reviews, signing containers, manifests, approved base images, known vulnerability, scanning, and no embargoed issues getting published too soon. So that was our current proposal. Like, really don't let anybody touch software that doesn't do these things.
So what about very further right of the flow? Like, what about the things that are actually running in production? Like, because some vulnerabilities are disclosed, like for the things you may have in your production setup. Like, how those things, again, one may consider that outside of supply chain, but again, we need to somehow roll back them or push the new version out there as quickly as possible. I don't know. Because here I see you have deploying like development, and I don't know if you have production there. But what happens after production? Do you have any thoughts about some checks on production side as well?
Yeah, I've seen people implement those things. Yeah, Red Hat has a pretty fancy one. It's kind of hard to onboard with, but once you do, it's integrated with Quay.io, right? So that has like a manifest of what's in the image, and that has a way of notifying people when a known CVE shows up. And they have some fancy internal pipeline that says, oh, when the notification comes through, we will actually automatically pull your source, update to the latest image, rebuild, republish. So actually, in some cases, they're able to do that automatically if you fit into a box of a certain kind of software, like an RPM or something, right? So yeah. I've done it for Node.js automatically too. In the interoperability thing, that's what I meant by the maintain stage. Or a maintain pipeline. I think it was a pipeline type, was something that will do that kind of thing, like check for vulnerabilities, update tags, rebuild, republish. I think most people in real life actually want that system to put up a pull request and then you approve it. Like, most people don't trust their test quite enough to have it like automatically go, but Yeah.
Yeah, I just checked your maintain stage. Yes, automatically update or upgrade previously built software. It doesn't say production explicitly, but yeah, it's again maintain stage. It could include previous stages as well. Yes, or invoke.
Yeah, a lot of times you can just rerun your dev pipeline, right, and get new output. I was actually trying to address comments on this earlier today, but I got fires at work this month, so it's been hard carving away time.
We have this maintained stage as an entirely separate pipeline. That's called a patch pipeline.
Mhm.
And its job is to rev your versions. It's managed I think entirely by another team also, which is interesting. It's owned by the platform teams. And so they will ship updates to say like, hey, our web framework version revved. So here's the pull request to make that fix. And then they'll do like automatic deploys and traffic mirroring to validate that things are the same and then deploy that fix. It's pretty interesting.
So to answer your question, yes, this is a common thing. Yeah. Sounds like a lot of people are reinventing the wheel on how to do that. Yeah, actually, the pipeline stages, like taking a step back, these do sometimes get separated in their own pipelines, right? Usually like build test goes together, but I have definitely seen separate deploy pipelines and like you said, maintain. But I've seen cases where it's also just all one pipeline. Like I've seen for a Node app, say it's like a basic Node microservice, you can totally throw these all into one pipeline. And maybe you turn different stages on and off based on whether it's a PR or merge to master or main or whatever. So.
Are there any things that you need in order to push these pull requests through to their next step or logical conclusion? Or is it just finding time and
for me, I thought I just had, for me, I thought I just had to address comments. Hopefully there's no comments that aren't on there, because when I do finally carve out 2 hours of time, I'm going to go off of what's on the GitHub. But then, yeah, do you all need anything from me other than addressing comments on these? Okay.
I think like I agree to Justin, like once those comments are addressed, perhaps we can continue iterating on this, like it's, that's what we have been doing. So, and I think events, it will be useful for event SIG as well as supply chain SIG. So we can, base our discussions on something merged rather than that's open.
I think
and then come back, yeah.
I think I owe the group a definition of what eBay pipelines look like, and written in terms of these definitions. So we can see what some examples look like. We'll work on that this afternoon.
Yeah, I agree. I think iteration is a good approach, and I think it's good to get them up there. I know the events SIG group is interested in this vocabulary work very much. So it's great to, I guess, merge it in, and then that gives them more of a basis to work from.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think I don't have anything else to talk about this
Yeah.
supply chain versus step stages, but yeah, it's very useful, this work. Thank you, Alfred, for and Marie for starting the work there. It's a lot of work.
You're welcome. I do have my evil plans. Like, I'm gonna make a reusable Tecton task. It's gonna happen.
Do you have anything else that we're hoping to talk about today?
No, there is nothing else on the agenda, unless there's something else that someone wants to bring up.
I'd be open to sharing the eBay doc around the different pipeline stages and different maturity model things, if that would be interesting to talk about. Seems like a group of folks who can offer some useful feedback. As I mentioned, this is not a like vetted sort of deal. Right. Okay. So bronze automated to staging. General idea is we want a stable staging environment, which we've put in a tremendous amount of effort into achieving. But teams are still doing a lot of, in the broader eBay world, people are doing a lot of like, I want to test my code, and so I'm going to steal staging for 30 minutes so I can see if it works, sort of stuff, which is not nice. And so kind of the criteria to hit this are, one, you need someone on your team who is a velocity champion. And what this means is, so like velocity is the internal program to help people follow kind of like standard best practices of small change sizes and automation and all the kind of DevOpsy things. You need static validations, which include all of those like, are you Sarbanes-Oxley compliant? And eventually, like, are you doing software supply chain pieces? We have an internal tool that tells you why your service takes forever to start for Java services. And so you have to use, basically this is a placeholder for, you have to use the fancy tools we've made for you. You need automated tests. Those tests need to appear in our test result repository so that we have broader understandings of pass fail rate and stability issues and things like that. This one's probably the hardest one for people to meet, which is you need to have a stable staging environment, and that includes your dependencies. Your dependencies need to be stable, and so that has like a difficult spider effect of this is not only within that team's control of whether they hit this criteria, and that's one of those topics we're trying to debate currently. Like, if your service fails all the time, then that's not great. So go fix it. But if you're not getting help from those other teams, that might be quite hard. That tremendous amount of effort that I was talking about is this program called Staging Get Well. And it's a group of folks whose whole job it is to monitor the availability of staging. And like, it's like hooked up to pagers and things like that. So like if staging's broken, then you get the ping at 3 a.m., which is controversial, but works. You need smoke tests, which is what eBay calls I think the industry refers to these as synthetic tests, small tests that run on a periodic basis to proactively monitor that the thing's working. And there's like tooling internally to help with that. And then no intervention between PR and deploy. That's kind of where we are with that. Any thoughts on that or questions or anything?
Like a combination of things, right? I mean, I see like DevOps and quality and like SRE together.
For sure. Yeah. And so the title of the document is Built with Velocity, which is like, are you doing it in the way that we're trying to convince you to write software? It's like and so here's your grading for this like entry level first step.
So this reminds me of what we're doing at Red Hat right now. They have this thing called the Managed Services Scorecard, which is 24 steps. And they got their SREs together. It's mostly about SRE. But there's some quality stuff in there too, and observability. And they're like, they ended up saying, well, 15 of those are must-dos and 5 are should-dos. And we're actively trying to break it down into like maturity levels. Like there's some SRE things that, yeah, again, even before you let a customer touch your stuff, you should make sure you can handle your compute nodes dying or something like that, right? Because it happens. But they're working on it in there's a build. I'll get the name of it. They're putting it in an open source project that might have some useful stuff in there to look at. Operate first. That's what it's called. Let me see if I can find you the link. The managed services scorecard isn't out there yet, but a bunch of advice on how to operate things is out there. I think maturity models, they would like if you're interested in collaborating in that space or something, that would be kind of cool too. I'll get the link.
Yeah, I'd love to basically just point at industry things and be like, you have to do that. You have to be level 2 of this thing to be level 1 of this thing. I think that would be really useful. So this is the section that's actually gone through the most discussion internally. There's other ones of like 2 other levels. The automated deprod is using canaries for your deploys. So monitor the metrics and auto rollback. Using feature flags, there's a large initiative going on around audience aware feature flags. That's not quite ready yet, but even standard like dark launch behavior and things like that. This is a story writing criteria, like you have to write your acceptance criteria in the story. So this is more on like how you do your work rather than the individual artifacts themselves. No QEs, writing your tests for you. We'll see how that goes. Let's see if there's anything. No manual intervention from PR merge until it's sitting in production. This is kind of part and parcel with the one above. Yeah, I think that this is all pretty. This is basically like do the things from before, but also get it in production safely. And then the bottom one is, we call it experimentation culture, but a lot of it is like idealism. So like everyone should be doing TDD. You should have tiny stories that ship within a day or two, using trunk-based development. Whoever wrote this document thinks that you should have your PR reviewed within the hour, which I've turned off comments in this view, but there's a long comment thread. A way to manage tech debt, doing SLO monitoring and things like that. And then opinions about how you should be running your sprints. But that's kind of where our head's at with these things. But
It's interesting, the gold one starts getting into more culture at that point.
for sure. And a large portion of, so like we did this velocity initiative thing last year, And so that was primarily focused on like from when you merge your code until when it's sitting in production. That was like the whole program. Like we want short lead times, we want frequent deploys, things like that. That was rolled out to, I think, like 5% of actively developed applications of like the 16,000 total applications we have internally. And this year it's going to scale up to 50% of active applications. And so a big theme of this is turning away from an initiative and more into indoctrination and culture work. And kind of as we're systematizing the work to get deployed to production solved, there's an alpha program starting up around this notion of what's called flow framework, which is testing the like, we're supposed to do this until PR's merged, like tracking that piece of like how we get the work done, which is kind of something we're piloting this year.
So what's interesting to me, in my experience, even what you have is your bronze level's pretty advanced. Like it would take a while for a new dev team to get to that point. Unless they already had senior people, right?
Tooling. Yeah, with the right platform tooling, this should be quite easy, I think. Let me look at that list again. So bronze was, share again. Pick a person. That should be easy. Hook up the deploy tooling of eBay. Should be fairly straightforward. Hook into this platform.
If everybody's using like the same, are y'all using like the same programming languages or like?
Yeah, so there's a thing. We have managed stacks, which are the approved eBay way of doing things, and it comes in Java, old Java, less old Java, and JavaScript.
Okay.
And those are like paved paths of, if you do this, you can click the button and you have close to a whole pipeline.
Right, because I know that Red Hat's old certification pipeline that's trying to build and IBM's certification pipeline, the IBM one only supports Golang and like building on OpenShift or Kubernetes, and that thing takes people months to onboard because there's so much diversity, right? And the Red Hat thing supports like 5 programming languages, and it also takes months to onboard. So I think
so where we're at right now is use the blessed tools or suffer. I think where we're heading is like thou shalt use containers, and then things need to be discoverable within the container. Like making it more of an API around, here's how you hook into our tooling, rather than use this thing and we'll figure it out for you.
Yeah.
This is like
easy.
included dependency. That one's easy. Automated tests are,
Should be
that's how people should work anyway. Write tests. This is like half a day of work.
I mean, integration tests, depending on how big a thing is, right? That can be a lot of work.
Yeah. But I would hope that people would be doing this anyway.
They should do it anyway. Yeah. It'll take a while to get all that done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a framework to provide this, which is you provide it some integration tests and it runs them once every 15 minutes. And if it succeeds, then it's happy. And if it's angry, then you get told. And so this, like, given the internal ecosystem, this is not so hard for folks. With the caveat of this dependencies one that they don't control. Like you have to have stable dependencies.
Cool.
Yeah.
I always feel like I learned something when I make it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that was really good conversation. I'm just sitting here soaking it in because now I'm like, my next step now is to go to our engineering teams and ask if we even have this or anything like this. This is cool.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It was very cool. And do you find, Justin, do you find that teams like build up through the layers? They start at bronze, go to silver, and then finally gold, or just some teams already more like gold teams for this kind of thing?
I think that there are no gold teams.
Okay.
I would say that most teams aren't even bronze, but we're working on it. And there's probably like 3 teams that are silver, like of the many that we have internally. It's the people who are, there's always that team internally that's kind of like pushing the boundaries of like, listen, I get out of my way. I know what I'm doing. Give me the tools I need, and then I'm going to go innovate and do cool stuff and be the elite performer. We have a few of those teams in there that gets them to about silver. And I think the reason that they're not in gold would be mostly tooling mismatches. Like, we don't provide tooling to allow them to do such and such. And so.
Yeah. Can I ask how much of this has been built out then with the teams themselves? Like, are this where they want to go, or where, if it's not being modeled on existing teams?
Yeah, so we're still in the process of figuring out, we're still shopping this around, basically. There are some teams who are like, bronze is way too hard, we'll never be there. And then there are some groups who are like, yeah, okay. And so there's still like a lot of discussion back and forth and horse trading, more or less, around what these things mean. In terms of how much of this has been developed with, like, in conjunction with teams, not a lot. This is more idealistic of like, listen, this is how you should be, like, in aggregate, this is how we think you should be deploying your software, like using everything we know about the industry and how good teams perform. And so, like, let's break it down into steps for you so that you can track towards this new way of working that we're going to be doing as a company.
Nice. And are you using, say, DORA metrics to show give positive feedback?
A very regular DORA metrics review with every team. And that's the core of what that velocity initiative has been. And then we're layering in flow metrics, flow framework metrics, to figure out like the development piece of that. Like, are we only working on features and never working on tech debt? That's probably a problem. Like those sorts of questions. So there's like some CD stuff in there, but it's not a strict CD thing. I'm hoping that we might be able to extract the CD pieces of this and come to some shared understanding of like, teams can or should maybe do things in roughly this order. If this is like the order that makes sense to build out this process. But not quite there yet to push that forward.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. We're almost at time for the meetings. Any more questions for Justin or any on our discussions today? Okay. great. Thank you all for being here. It's really great discussion. Yeah, super informative today. So thank you all for that. That's great. And again, thank you to Melissa for joining as our new chair. Really excited. It's going to be great. So good news all around. Great. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.